All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Devin McCarthy. I work for the state of Washington in the Washington Technology Solutions, or WATEC, everyone loves acronyms over there, department, where I am an information security analyst. I focus primarily on vulnerability management. So I wanted to, for my talk, kind of focus in on the squishier side of vulnerability management and how to move from like a siloed vulnerability management program to a culture of shared vulnerability ownership. So just a level set, I wanted to give a definition of vulnerability management. It's a little wordy, so sorry for that. But here, the definition that I found that I liked was vulnerability management is a continuous, proactive, and often automated process that keeps your computer safe, networks and enterprise applications safe from cyber attacks and data breaches. And it's an important part of an overall security program. And I'm sure those of you who are in IT organizations have experienced something like this in Slack or Teams, where a security team says, hey, there's a network issue, tags the network team. Network team says, well, this is actually an application vulnerability, tags the DevOps team. DevOps says, we don't own this system, tags the IT ops team. And then they say, oh, security should really determine how critical this is. And in the meantime, the vulnerability just sits unpatched. And so today we're going to explore how to transform from that it's not my problem into we're in this together. So I know there are lots of models around for vulnerability management maturity, but this is my version, and it's based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where the bottom of the pyramid is kind of the lowest level, and you're trying to move up the pyramid to the top. And so it starts out at chaos. That's your program, where it's basically firefighter mode, next reactive, then coordinated, which I think is actually where a lot of companies kind of get stuck because they have the processes, but generally the teams are still siloed from each other. And then the top is an integrated vulnerability management program, and that's the focus of where we want to get to. And so I don't have time to go through each level of that pyramid in detail, but I thought I'd give like a snapshot of what it looks like at the bottom of the pyramid and at the top. So at the bottom, you kind of have an emergency mindset. So every vulnerability feels critical. There's constant context switching. Burnout's real for this. And actually this decrease actual security because everything's critical, right? You don't have any sense of what can be triaged and what actually isn't important to your system. Everything's an emergency. Whereas at that integrated level, it's more of a routine mindset, risk-based prioritization, planned maintenance windows, sustainable processes, and overall more secure because you can do that prioritization. So I wanted to walk through a few pieces of vulnerability management as we kind of have looked at the kind of where we're wanting to go to. And so I'm going to kind of pulling off pieces here. So the first piece I want to talk about is vulnerability scanning. And so there's a common trap, which a lot of management and executive get into, which is if we just had the right scanner, all our problems would be solved. But in reality, tools don't create culture. And more data isn't always better data. And scanner fatigue is real. And I don't know if any of you have stared at an output from a vulnerability scanner, just pages of vulnerabilities and not knowing where to start with those. It's not helpful. It just feels like you're overwhelmed. So what are the right questions to ask when you're trying to come up with what to scan and what vulnerability scanners you're going to use for your vulnerability management program? What does the tool, so coverage, what does the tool see, and does it see what matters to our environment? Can it distinguish between theoretical and practical risks, which is a big one, which you'll see in a sec? Does it fit into an existing workflow? And can multiple teams access and understand the output? And really, you're trying to find a vulnerability scanner that your team uses and trusts. And otherwise, it's just another thing to have. So kind of moving from that vulnerability scanning to the output. So the next piece I want to talk about is kind of triaging CVEs and vulnerability scoring. So here is an example. It's very generic, but let's say you have a CVSS score that comes through you get an email saying that there's a critical vulnerability, but as you dig into it, it needs local access, physical presence, specific hardware configurations, and you are a cloud-based organization. Like the actual score for your organization is not that high. It is much, much lower, maybe 0 in that particular instance. And so these vulnerability scores, they're like the starting point, but not the finish line, right? You really need that context. And so how do you look at these CVEs and vulnerability scores, kind of like a detective? I like to use this framework. So what is the likelihood? So assessing the likelihood, has this been exploited in the wild is a big one. Are there public exploits for the availability? What's the attack complexity? What industry is currently being targeted is also a really big one that's kind of underutilized. Like, are we actually in the striking path? Next, what's the business impact of the vulnerability? What systems are affected in our environment? What's the potential business impact? And are there compensating controls in place already that we can lean on? And then finally, what is the source credibility? Who reported the vulnerability? What's the quality of the research? And are there conflicting reports? I remember there was one vulnerability that came through, I think it was maybe a year ago, where it was flashing on all sorts of news reports saying, this critical vulnerability, and it had been just one news source that had put it out that was not, it didn't have good depth into looking into the vulnerability, and everyone was just parroting that same story. Everyone was pointing back to that one story. So good to make sure you have a credible source, and usually multiple sources are the way that I go with these. So kind of looked at the scanning, scoring, and now I wanted to look more at the squishy side, as I said at the beginning, of the not my problem mentality. And really, it's about relationships and breaking down silos and talking to folks in a way that gets heard. And so, why do people say this isn't my problem when they're confronted with, can you fix this vulnerability or help me with this vulnerability? They're afraid that if they touch it, they own it forever. They don't have a good context, so don't understand why it matters. They're already overwhelmed, which a lot of us already are, of course. And there's no real clear ownership. Like, no one knows who should be handling that particular patch or fix. And so one way to get through those is kind of an empathy bridge. So let's say the before you kind of use this empathy bridging with the relationship, you say, this critical vulnerability needs to be patched immediately. But after, you could, like, kind of using this model, I found a potential security issue that could affect customer data. I know you're in the middle of Q4 release, but could we talk about the best way to address this problem? So it's not, this has to be fixed with zero context. It's, here's the context. How can we move forward with this? I kind of already said all that. So to structure your communication in a way that can be heard, I like using the CARE framework. These are all frameworks. I realize I have like a billion frameworks. The CARE framework. So that's structuring my communications to provide context, why it matters, action, what needs to happen, what support can be provided with resources, and empathy, acknowledging their constraints and priorities. So here I'm going to read this because just showing kind of using this model to really communicate well and be heard by the DevOps team here. So I know you're focused on the payment system upgrade. We discovered a privilege escalation vulnerability in the API gateway that could compromise customer payment data. We need to apply a configuration change that should take about 10 minutes. I can handle the change myself if you can provide a maintenance window or walk through it or I can walk through it with your team. I understand this adds complexity to your release timeline, so let's figure out the best approach together. So as you can kind of hear, it's really hitting them where they are, building that relationship, and showing that you aren't just hitting them over the head with a vulnerability score. You are providing all the context they need to really act and also be a partner in it. And so kind of moving from that into kind of some more strategies for building that one-on-one trust. So you kind of figure out how to talk with each other in a more constructive way to be heard. But really, the goal of that upper level of vulnerability management maturity is having those relationships. And so how do you break that like forever hook problem? So if I help with this vulnerability, they'll always come for me for security issues, right? That's the real concern. People are overwhelmed and also don't maybe not understand the context. So once you build like a one-on-one relationship, you start to build trust, and you move to having willing partners rather than people that you're just conscripting into do this now. So there is the relationship is very important. And the approach that I do is I meet them where they are. So learning their tools, I provide value first. I help with their problems rather than just starting with my own. And then I share knowledge back. So I try to let them know kind of the context that I found, as well as how other people have solved the vulnerability or how it has worked in the past well. So I try to kind of provide value with asking for something. I also want to make sure that things get done, but I try to have that open relationship with folks that I'm working with for vulnerability management. And also celebrate wins. This is a huge one. I actually had a couple developers who the very sticky vulnerability that they had to work with the vendor. They were on meetings, hours and hours and hours of meetings to figure out how to work that vulnerability or fix that vulnerability in our system. And they put in all this time. And so there's like a kudos board we have. And so I shouted out to them and I said, man, they're doing amazing work. Like they really killed it here. And I heard back from them that they really appreciated that. And the upper management also saw that they were helpful and gave them a kudos. So it was really cool. So I think it's underrated, kind of shouting people out, but I think it's really important. And yeah, just the final result of this is you then have teams that will come to you with their security concerns, similar to how security champions generally work. And to that end, I am a proponent of creating vulnerability champions. I think these are a key part of vulnerability management maturity. And it can be done formally or informally, but these are folks across teams that are doing patches or managing their vulnerable systems, and should be like a community that you can use to assess an impact and also just help with moving forward with vulnerability patching or management. And so who would be a good candidate for vulnerability champions? So natural allies are team members that already care about security. Those have been helpful in the past. People with influence in their groups are really important. And then you want to empower them and provide security training for their role, give them early access to vulnerability information, kind of have that community that you can bounce ideas off of and figure out compensating controls, and make them the heroes of the security success stories. Like I was saying, that a lot of people feel like they aren't part of security. I hear this quite a bit. Like, I'm not part of security. I don't need to think about security in that way. But if they become the success stories, because we all are part of security, really, because security is meant to enact the goals of the company and make sure it's secure. So having like shouting out the people that are doing the patching and the vulnerabilities, taking care of the vulnerabilities as the heroes, really important. And then support them, regular check-ins and feedback, give them resources and tools that they need, and then also protect them from pushback, because this is a culture shift that I'm describing here. And so culture is hard to change. Protecting them from pushback and helping the higher ups understand why this is important, really key. So finally, I wanted to deal with the facet of maturing an integrated vulnerability management program in transparency. And this is the one I have probably the hardest time with enacting, because it really means providing a place for everyone to see all the vulnerabilities that you're working on in the context. And that can be hard if you have some vulnerabilities that are out there that have been there for a while, and then executives see them and start sending emails and don't necessarily know the context. But it is really important to move to that next stage. So what you really need real-time vulnerability dashboards to show. You need clear ownership assignments of those vulnerabilities, progress tracking with context, and then again, celebrating the wins. Like, this is huge. Like, just, it doesn't cost anything, but just shouting out things that are going well. But the key is transparency without blame. Collective improvement, not individual punishment. Okay. So I feel like I'm just burning through my time here very quickly, but I wanted to put together like a plan of action on kind of some milestones and what that would look like in a particular maturity of your vulnerability management program. So week one would be, assessing where you are, identifying your current maturity model, mapping your stakeholder relationships, and auditing your communication patterns. So enacting kind of that care, or starting to at least seeing where you are at. Month in, building the foundation. So implementing that, as I said, that care communication framework, starting one-on-one relationship building, establishing transparent tracking of your vulnerabilities. And then like 3 months in, the culture shift, deploying vulnerability champions, measuring collaboration metrics, iterating based on feedback, and then finally continuous improvement. So once you kind of have this in place, having regular check-ins, evolving processes based on what works, and sharing success stories. Again, very, very huge. And I will say, because this is what I'm describing as this culture shift, right? From, kind of this siloed approach, or this siloed approach, really. Everybody, these are handled in teams, and, you're the vulnerability manager, and you say what the patching, like that something's vulnerable, and then it's sent to the teams, and they do whatever they do, right? Which could be getting it done, but also could be it gets passed along because nobody's really clear on the context and where it goes from there. So moving from that kind of culture to a culture of working together on these vulnerability management issues, or vulnerability issues, and also kind of getting out in front of it, being proactive. That could be a really big culture shift. And culture eats strategy for breakfast, generally, if you've heard that phrase. And really what that means is the cultures take time to change. They are not, they aren't, it's like a big cruise ship, right? You can't turn it all at once. It's going to keep going in the direction that it's going, and you need to make incremental change. And that is done by putting energy into the change. Culture, you need to continually put energy into making that change. So that continuous improvement, making sure you're iterating and working on the foundations of each of these pieces are very, very important. And also having executive buy-in, of course, as well. That always seems to be a critical piece as well, to kind of make sure you have the resources to do that. But yeah, providing energy, or putting energy into change, culture change, is what actually moves it. Otherwise, these things, it starts off with a big bang, and then kind of, as you'll see, they kind of slowly peter out because that energy isn't continually put in. So this is kind of my wrap-up slide. I feel like I've raced through this a little bit, so hopefully there's some questions that we can talk on. But shifting from that, not my problem, to our shared vision. So remember, you're not just managing vulnerabilities, you're building a security culture. And that culture is going to strengthen your overall security footprint. Everything will get better based on a culture shift in this way, I believe. Move from finding fault to solving problems, from assigning blame to sharing responsibility, and from security theater to security partnership. And the challenge I have for you is go back to your organization and start one conversation differently, using empathy instead of urgency, build one relationship instead of sending one more email, and create one champion instead of one more policy. And at the end of the day, the strongest security control isn't a tool or process, as I say here. It's the team that truly believes we're all in it together. And yeah, I'll just also say that, like, picking up a call and calling somebody and talking through, finding out what matters to them and what's important to you, it's a game changer for just in general breaking down the silos in your company, even if it's not security related. But man, security, it really matters. All right, I raced through it, but I'm happy to take questions. I feel like I'm done a little bit early, but yeah, happy to talk through and answer questions if anybody wants to talk about vulnerability management.
Yeah, we do have some questions here from Zoom. What is your opinion about vendors who provide their own vulnerability ratings instead of using the well-known CVSS score?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it can be useful if the vendor has a relationship with your systems. That tends to be, they're hopefully the idea is that they're using, what has been vulnerable in your system before and what's actually vulnerable as the um, to what am I trying to say to enhance those scores. That is something that we deal with as well, and I think it's useful. It's not. I don't trust it fully. I always verify. So when it is something that looks big, I generally will go and verify. Or if it's something that's part of a better known vulnerability, I will go and kind of dig around and make sure that we're getting a full picture. But definitely can be useful. But the key really is if they know your system. I don't know if you have a thought on that as well, Eric, but that's my take. That
Yes,
enhancing it. Mhm.
it does play an interesting part where it does apply or it is applicable to your individual environment. Like let's just say oh my gosh. We'll talk about the Citrix stuff, right?
Mhm.
That seems to be in the news every day, or Synology or QNAP. That's a better one. Um, that a 0 day could be available for your local NAS that will allow someone to gain unauthorized access into your device. Okay, yeah, that's a big freaking problem, right? But where does your Synology or QNAP or other NAS device sit in your network? Is it in your trusted environment, your OT environment? Is it accessible by the public? Can they get to it from the cloud aspect of things? So you got to apply certain filters to things to really figure out that stuff. And that's why, there's the EPSS rating tool. Um,
Mhm.
and shameless plug, we created one, epslookuptool.com, and you can look at how impactful could it be potentially to your environment and your setup.
Do you have any good advice or resources to start a vulnerability management program?
Ooh, I got a
I
follow
think,
up to that one.
yeah, please. Yeah, go for it. No, you started.
So,
I'll think on it.
well, it's going to piggyback right off of that because a lot of insurance companies and carriers that we deal with are looking to vulnerability management tools for an early assessment of, either new policies or renewal of policies. And they're like, "What do you think about this?" I'm like, "Oh God, here we go."
I believe it's NIST has a vulnerability management framework that
Mhm.
I think would be a good start just to get an idea of the flow. All their frameworks kind of they seem to have kind of that flow of kind of start here and then you go back to the top again.
Mhm.
I guess I'm describing a circle, but I think that's where if you don't have anything, I think that's where I would start. This is more on you've got a bit more of an established program, and this is the way to kind of jump started into that next level and kind of where you go. But I think if you're at the baseline, I would maybe lean on that NIST vulnerability management.
Well,
Um,
let me ask this next question to you because I
sure, sure,
think this leads right into this could be helpful. Okay.
yeah.
This one's from Static Tier. Any idea how to build security culture and any tips on getting management to buy in while also trying to do grassroots at the same time? So, more specifically trying to implement, vuln management and things like that. Any tips?
Yeah, I think the having that context there is actually a really good. I feel like I'm plugging, but there's a XM Cyber has a recent free course that Jerry Ozier did called it's like describing risk to the board or presenting risk to the board. I'm sorry, I'm butchering the name if anybody else remembers it. Um, they really talk about how you can take that. He does a great job at taking security risks and translating those into things that the board cares about. So this is more on like having a board, but it works with any kind of higher ups as well. And so I think it could be really useful if, as I said, it's free, and I thought it was really good. So it's on XM Cyber's site, and you can go and just and take that and kind of use what it would be useful to create some presentations. I think would be good. There's also a book called Leading Without Authority. I think it's Leading Without Authority, which is a really good book about kind of that grassroots. Like you can at any time start showing, leadership in your organization. These are all really squishy things. I'm not giving like super practical advice, but I tend to be the kind of person that kind of pushes on those silos, and I want to break them down. So I usually just I call the people and talk to them and start developing those sort of relationships on the bottom level. And then I bubble it up to upper management and say, here's what's going on, here's what I'm hearing, and here's what I'm trying to do, and kind of get buy-in in that way. I think making it clear what the benefits are for doing something like this, or breaking down the silos of a security program. I mean, it's really fundamental to having a fully secure organization, because you need to be able to talk to people. You need to be able to bubble things up to, if there's something that doesn't feel right, you got like the developing that spidey sense of when something's not quite right, and being able to go to somebody with that without if you're wrong, that it becomes an issue that they wag their finger at you or something. Like having people that you trust and developing that trust, I think is really, really crucial. But yeah, it's hard with the higher ups, hard for the buy-in. I think knowing how to communicate them with them is going to be a great skill if you can take that on and figure out how to talk to people in a way that they understand why security is important. And of course it is, but explaining that, yeah. I feel like I rambled on that. Did I capture it?
Dude, no, I love it, man. I love it. Should patch management be a separate program from vulnerability management?
Ooh. I think it kind of tends to be, in organizations where, especially when you're big enough, because you'll have all sorts of systems that are doing their own patch cycles and those sort of things. And you have the person that's kind of managing, okay, where are we vulnerable here? I'm going to flag these things and then send them to the people that fix the patches. I think an overall vulnerability management like picture, maybe not doing the patches if maybe you have a large enough organization where you aren't the same person doing the patches and actually managing the vulnerabilities. But I think having the vulnerability management, I think, is more of the window into all the things that are vulnerable and should be dealt with, rather than the executing on it. But I know that's not always true in like smaller organizations. It can be the same person who's doing both. But I do think having it split makes more sense, because you have a clearer picture of the overall organization and how things fit together, rather than just that patch piece of it. Or you're a product that you're really good at, and you understand how it all fits together. But I think having that larger view is important in that regard.
Yeah, I do think that it needs to be more integrated, and being able to because vulnerability management needs to be able to speak with patch management, because one side is going to say this needs to be patched, and then it's trying to make sure it gets patched, and are the registry keys added, is it this, is it that, is it whatever. And yeah,
Totally.
it definitely needs to be a good circle. When you're unsure how to remedy a vulnerability, what is your typical process look like, especially when you're trying to build that champion connection to help drive resolution?
Dang, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
That's very good. Let's say I have a championship program going. I have a group of people I can bounce things off of. It's really useful, especially in this particular question. So obviously it's after you've kind of created something, but having people that you trust that you can bounce vulnerabilities off of, to say, hey, how does this connect in our system? This looks tricky. Can you help me think through this? And like where the steps are? Because a lot of, and sometimes they'll say, actually, this person over here knows that particular system, or this person over there, and then it becomes a person I can reach out to and kind of start that relationship as well. But the process I usually do, I get as much context as possible. So I'm kind of a junkie on all of the cybersecurity stuff because I just love it. I love cybersecurity, and I basically live it all the time. I'm always reading blogs and news articles and podcasts, and I'm just in it, because I love it. So I kind of have my trusted sources that'll go through, kind of news related or podcasts, as my kind of getting as much context as possible around it, and then a lot of the systems that I deal with, I know a lot of the background of it, but not everything, and so I can take that context, that kind of, here's this CVE X that has this vulnerability, and we've gotten this warning about it from MSISAC, and so here I'm just going in and I take that and I start getting as much context as possible, kind of where it could potentially be in our system, and then going to somebody who knows more than me, which are a lot of people. I definitely don't know everything at all, but I'll go to them and say, can you help me understand how this would be an issue, how this fits in? And I feel like that conversation, so many people want to help. Like 99% of the people that I deal with, they want to help. They want to understand how it works. And then once I have that bigger context, I can make the call of like, okay, what's the actual score of this? How does it actually affect our system? And should there be compensating controls? Should it be patched in this way if there's a way to patch it? So that's kind of I feel like all my stuff is very squishy like relationships, but I really do think like so much of what I saw when I started in cybersecurity was kind of, we're over here in cybersecurity, you're over there in development. We can't talk back and forth or whatever. And I just don't buy that. I want to talk to everybody and understand what they do and want them to understand what I do.
So to piggyback off of that one, because we run into a lot, being a part of our IR retainer, and we're like, look, this device is nearing end of life. We understand it is mission critical for business operations to be running.
Mm-hmm.
However, this thing is a nuclear time bomb waiting to go off. Management's like, we don't care. And all the IT and security guys are like, yeah, we understand the risk. How do we minimize that risk? And how do you navigate I know how we do it, but definitely walk through your tactics on those type of conversations.
Yeah, I think it's like, with the state, it's there is kind of an easier piece of it because there's legislation that say like what has to happen when it hits a certain level of like, it's end of life, this has to be, off of our system, that sort of thing. So that helps a little bit in this conversation. It's like, we've got the policy, here it is. Like, there is kind of that cudgel piece of it. But I think coming kind of a little bit back to that kind of board conversation, which is funny because it's not the board, but understanding how to translate that to real outcomes. I think, this system's end of life. Well, what does that mean exactly? And, let's say it's an end of life thing that's publicly facing to the internet, and it is going to stop getting security updates, and it is going to be, attacked by all these different things that are going to come through into our system. Like, this is really worrisome. And talking about the money side of it, like, are we insurable if we have end of life systems and we get breached on that system? Like, does that, are we showing we were not being, diligent enough with our systems, even though mission critical? So I think understanding the context and really explaining that clearly, the end result, I think the middle path is probably something like compensating controls, making sure it's not internet facing, protected in intranet, and then having a clear like timeline of how you're switching off of the end of life systems, because it's not like we don't get a lot of heads up that it's happening, but also a lot of systems are old and don't don't do well with upgrades quickly. So
I think this one will probably wrap it up unless there's one other burning question. Are there any books or other resources that you would recommend that would help us get better on the soft side required for this? And I'll throw out my recommendation as well.
Awesome. Yeah. I mentioned that one. It's Lead Without Authority. I really found that one very useful. It just the gist is that you can start showing leadership qualities. You can do things internally without having that title. Now, I'm not saying like do the work of a executive for no money or whatever, but that is, I feel like that is really a useful book for me to point to. Let me think of others. We want to do one, Eric, and I'll think of some others that have been useful to me.
So one that I've always found very useful that I always go back to at least a couple times or at least once a year is Never Split the Difference. That really helps you understand the art of negotiation from an FBI standpoint. And it's a really, really good listen and or read if you can stomach it. There's another one. I'm actually pulling up my Audible right now, and it's got an explicit word, so I'll just say bleep in it. Give me one. So I got so many books in my Audible.
Sure. I do have a shameless plug, which I don't think we've ever talked about on any of these. But I wrote a book with my dad. Actually, my dad was an organizational consultant for 30 years, so he helped change cultures. Like that's kind of this idea, but for large health organizations and stuff. And we wrote a book called Navigating with Trust. You can find it on Amazon, but I'm pretty proud of it. I basically co-wrote it with him and edited it. So if you find that the idea is kind of how you develop that trust, what you do if the trust is broken, how you mend it, how you work together. It's again on the kind of squishy side of all this stuff. But I think I'm proud of the book. So if that's useful to somebody, yeah, I'm happy to share that.
The other one is by Robert Greene called The Laws of Human Nature. Definitely listen to that one as well.
Nice.
Awesome, man. Yeah. So as we close this thing out, because I know the next one's getting started up here in just a few minutes, thank you so much, Devin, for hosting or putting this thing on. It's been very, very informative, and I'm sure a lot of people got value. I know I did in having our conversation with you. Thank you all again. Thank you again, Devin, for doing this, and we will see y'all in the next one. Take care.
Yeah. See you at lunch. Cheers.